There are unseen battles taking place within the walls of your home. Battles that do not make noise, yet quietly influence your peace, your thoughts, and even your destiny. What if the discomfort you feel, the unexplained heaviness, or the constant unrest is not random? What if certain objects you have welcomed into your home are silently opening doors you never intended to open? In a world that often dismisses the spiritual realm, many remain unaware that not everything is spiritually neutral. Some items carry histories, intentions, and influences that go far beyond what the eyes can see. The enemy does not always attack in obvious ways. Sometimes he works subtly, using objects, symbols, and items that seem harmless on the surface but carry deeper spiritual consequences. These objects can become legal entry points, giving darkness permission to linger where light was meant to dwell. This is not about fear, it is about awareness. It is about understanding that spiritual warfare is real, and your home is meant to be a place of protection, not a battleground unknowingly surrendered. The question is not whether spiritual influence exists, but whether you are discerning enough to recognize it. There is a dangerous assumption many people carry into their daily lives that everything they bring into their homes is harmless as long as it looks ordinary and acceptable. On the surface, this belief creates a false sense of security. Because the spiritual realm does not operate according to human perception, what appears neutral to the eyes can carry deeper meanings, influences, and histories that are completely hidden from physical sight. Throughout history, objects have been used as vessels of intention, devotion, and even rebellion against God. When something is created, dedicated, or used within a spiritual context, it does not simply lose that connection. Over time, many items carry the residue of what they were exposed to, whether it was prayer, worship, or something far darker. This is why assuming neutrality can become spiritually dangerous. The enemy thrives in deception, and one of his most effective strategies is convincing people that nothing carries spiritual weight, when in reality, many things do if a person never questions. What they allow into their space, they unknowingly remove. A layer of protection. Discernment is not fear, it is awareness. It is the ability to recognize the physical and spiritual worlds are more connected than most people realize. Some objects may appear decorative, cultural, or sentimental, yet their origin or purpose may be rooted in beliefs, practices, or rituals that oppose truth. When such items are brought into a home, they do not always remain passive. They can influence atmosphere, mindset, and even spiritual sensitivity. People may begin to experience confusion, heaviness, or unrest without understanding the source. Ignoring this reality does not remove its impact, it simply allows it to continue unchecked. A home is meant to be a place of peace, clarity, and protection. Yet, when unseen influences are present, that peace can be slowly replaced with tension and unease. Recognizing that not everything is neutral is the first step toward reclaiming authority over what enters and remains within your environment. This awareness requires intentional reflection and honesty about what has been allowed without question. It challenges the idea that all influence is visible or easily explained. Sometimes the smallest items carry the strongest impressions. Because they were never examined closely, the absence of visible harm does not guarantee spiritual safety, and ignoring that truth can leave space for things that quietly disrupt alignment with peace. When a person begins to see beyond the surface, they start to understand that every object carries a story, a purpose, or an association. Some of those associations are uplifting, while others may be rooted in darkness. Choosing what remains in your home then becomes more than decoration. It becomes a spiritual decision, one that shapes the atmosphere you live in every day. This understanding awakens responsibility, because once you recognize that not everything is neutral, you can no longer ignore what may be influencing your space. It invites a deeper level of awareness, where you begin to question, not out of fear, but out of wisdom, what belongs and what does not, what brings light, and what quietly pulls away from it. The shift in perspective transforms how you view your surroundings, turning passive acceptance into active discernment. It strengthens your ability to guard what matters and to remain aware that influence is not always loud or obvious. Sometimes it is quiet, subtle, and persistent, working in ways that go unnoticed until their effects become undeniable and deeply rooted within your environment and daily experience, leaving traces that shape thoughts, emotions, and spiritual sensitivity over time in ways that are rarely questioned. Or there are moments when people begin to sense that something within their home feels different without any visible cause or explanation. This subtle shift often goes unnoticed at first because it does not manifest in obvious ways, yet it quietly influences the atmosphere, thoughts, and emotions of those who live there. Objects are not always as empty as they appear because they can absorb meaning, intention, and energy from the environments and purposes they have been connected to over time. Some items are created or used in contexts that involve spiritual dedication, rituals, or beliefs that leave an imprint beyond the physical form. When these objects are later moved into new spaces, they do not always lose what they were once tied to. Instead, they may carry traces of those associations, influencing the environment in ways that cannot be easily explained by logic alone. This is where many people misunderstand the nature of influence, believing that only intentional actions matter, while overlooking the possibility that objects themselves can serve as quiet carriers of deeper connections. The enemy often relies on this lack of awareness because it allows influence to remain hidden without resistance. When something is not questioned, it is rarely challenged, and what goes unchallenged can continue to operate freely within a space. Over time, these sub-TLE influences may begin to affect the atmosphere of a home, creating feelings of heaviness, restlessness, or unease that seem disconnected from any clear cause. People might notice changes in their thoughts, emotions, or even relationships without realizing that something external could be contributing to that shift. This does not mean every object carries such weight, but it does mean that some do, and ignoring that possibility leaves room for influence to grow without recognition. Discernment becomes essential in this understanding because it allows a person to look beyond appearances and consider the origin, purpose, and association of what they bring into their space. It is not about fear or suspicion, but about awareness and wisdom, recognizing that what surrounds you can shape what you experience internally and spiritually. When a person begins to pay attention to these details, they may start to identify patterns that were previously ignored, noticing how certain items seem connected to shifts in atmosphere or emotion. This awareness opens the door to making intentional choices about what remains and what is removed from the environment, strengthening the sense of control and clarity within the home. Understanding that objects can carry unseen influence changes the way a person interacts with their surroundings. It replaces passive acceptance with active awareness, encouraging a deeper level of responsibility for the environment being created each day and how it affects not only the physical space, but also the spiritual condition of those who dwell within it, creating an awareness that influence is not always immediate or visible, but can develop gradually through consistent exposure to what has been allowed to remain without question or understanding, shaping the atmosphere in ways that prepare the ground for further subtle entry points that often go unnoticed until their presence becomes more evident through changes that seem difficult to explain or trace back to a single source. As these influences deepen, they can create pathways that allow other forms of subtle interference to take hold more easily within the same environment, reinforcing patterns that were never intended and slowly normalizing what should have been recognized and addressed much earlier. before it had the chance to settle and expand further into daily life and thought patterns that begin to feel familiar even when they are not beneficial or life. Most people expect spiritual attacks to be obvious, dramatic, and impossible to ignore, yet that is rarely how they begin. The enemy does not rely on noise or his ability to gain influence. Instead, he often moves quietly, working through subtle entry points that appear harmless, insignificant, or easily dismissed. This strategy is effective because it bypasses resistance. When something seems small, it is rarely questioned, and what is not questioned is rarely guarded against. Subtlety creates access. It allows influence to enter without triggering alarm, and once it is present, it can begin to operate beneath the surface, shaping thoughts, emotions, and perspectives in ways that feel natural rather than external. A small compromise, a seemingly innocent object, or an overlooked habit can become an open door, not because of its size, but because of the lack of awareness surrounding it. The danger lies in how easily these entry points blend into daily life. They do not demand attention. They do not announce their presence. They simply exist within the environment, slowly establishing a foothold over time. What was once unfamiliar begins to feel normal, and what should have been recognized as out of place becomes accepted without resistance. This gradual shift makes it difficult to identify when something has changed because the process was not sudden, but progressive. Many people look for major disruptions when trying to understand spiritual influence, yet overlook the quiet beginnings that lead to those outcomes. The enemy understands that gaining small access consistently is more effective than forcing large confrontations. Subtle entry points create pathways that can expand over time, allowing deeper influence to develop once the initial access has been secured. These entry points can take many forms, sometimes through objects, sometimes through environments, sometimes through repeated exposure to certain ideas or atmospheres that slowly reshape perception. Each instance may seem harmless on its own, yet when combined, they create a pattern that begins to influence the overall condition of a space and the people within it. Discernment requires attention to these small details because they often reveal what is happening beneath the surface. Recognizing subtlety is not about overanalyzing every situation, but about remaining aware that influence rarely begins in obvious ways. It starts quietly, building momentum until its presence becomes strong enough to affect behavior, thinking, and emotional stability. As awareness grows, a person begins to notice how certain patterns repeat, how specific environments feel different, and how some influences seem to linger even without a clear source. This recognition brings clarity, revealing that what once seemed random may actually be connected to entry points that were never addressed or even noticed. Understanding this strategy shifts perspective from reacting to problems after they appear to identifying access before it grows. It encourages a proactive mindset where attention is given not only to what is visible, but also to what is subtle, hidden, and easily ignored. This level of awareness strengthens the ability to guard against influence before it becomes deeply rooted. The realization that the enemy often works through subtle entry points challenges the assumption that only major actions matter. It highlights the importance of small decisions, small allowances, and small compromises, showing how they can collectively shape a much larger outcome over time, influencing the direction of a home and the atmosphere it carries in ways that are not immediately visible, but become increasingly powerful as they remain unrecognized and unchallenged, gradually preparing the environment for deeper levels of access that continue to build upon the foundation that was quietly established in the beginning. There are moments when doors are opened without intention, not through deliberate choice, but through a lack of awareness that something even exists to be opened. Spiritual doors do not always appear as clear decisions or conscious actions. They are often formed through small permissions, repeated exposures, and unexamined acceptance of what enters a space. A person may believe they are simply living normally, surrounding themselves with everyday objects and influences, yet unknowingly allowing access to something deeper that operates beyond what can be seen. These doors are not physical, yet they are real in their effect. They represent points of access where influence is allowed to enter and remain. What makes them dangerous is not their existence, but the fact that they can be opened without recognition. When awareness is absent, there is no resistance, and when there is no resistance, access becomes easier to maintain. The environment begins to shift in subtle ways, not because of a single moment, but because of a series of unnoticed permissions that accumulate over time. Many people assume that only intentional actions carry spiritual consequences, yet unintentional openness can be just as significant. When something is welcomed without understanding its origin or influence, it can create a pathway that was never meant to exist. This is how doors are formed quietly, without warning, and without immediate signs that anything has changed. The lack of immediate effect often reinforces the belief that nothing has happened, allowing the door to remain open longer than it should. As time passes, the presence behind that open door can begin to influence the atmosphere, shaping thoughts, emotions, and even behaviors in ways that feel natural rather than external. This is what makes it difficult to trace the source, because the change is gradual and blends into everyday experience. What was once a peaceful environment may begin to feel unsettled, yet the connection to its cause remains hidden because the door was never recognized in the first place. Closing a door that was never acknowledged becomes more challenging because it requires first identifying that it exists. This is where awareness becomes essential, not as a reaction to fear, but as a commitment to understanding what is allowed within a space. It involves questioning what has been accepted without thought and examining whether it aligns with the peace and protection that a home is meant to hold. The process of recognizing these doors brings clarity to what may have felt confusing or unexplained. It reveals that influence does not always force its way in, but is often given permission through small, unnoticed openings. Each overlooked detail becomes significant when seen through this perspective, showing how easily access can be granted when attention is absent. This realization shifts the focus from reacting to visible problems to becoming aware of hidden entry points. It encourages a deeper level of intentionality in what is allowed to remain within a home and what is permitted to shape its atmosphere. The understanding that doors can be opened unknowingly challenges complacency and invites a more vigilant approach to protecting what should be a place of peace. As awareness increases, it becomes easier to recognize patterns that once went unnoticed, revealing how certain influences may have gained access through repeated exposure or passive acceptance. These patterns highlight the importance of paying attention not only to what is obvious, but also to what quietly integrates itself into daily life, creating openings that can expand over time and lead to deeper levels of influence that continue to grow in subtle yet powerful ways within the environment. Discernment is not an instinct that appears automatically. It is a cultivated awareness that grows stronger with intention, attention, and a willingness to see beyond what is immediately visible. In a world filled with constant noise, distractions, and surface-level appearances, it becomes easy to move through life without questioning what surrounds you. Yet without discernment, a person becomes vulnerable to influences that are subtle, persistent, and often hidden beneath what seems ordinary. To protect your home, your mind, and your inner peace, discernment must become active rather than passive. It requires a conscious decision to evaluate not only what is clearly harmful, but also what may quietly carry influence beneath its appearance. This means slowing down enough to observe, to question, and to reflect on what is being allowed into your space. It is not about suspicion toward everything, but about awareness of what aligns with peace and what disrupts it. Many people ignore the importance of discernment because they rely on what they can see and understand easily. However, spiritual influence does not always operate within the boundaries of logic or immediate evidence. It often moves through patterns, atmospheres, and repeated exposures that gradually shape perception and behavior. Without discernment, these patterns can take root unnoticed, creating a sense of normalcy around what should have been questioned. Discernment sharpens the ability to recognize differences that are not obvious at first glance. It allows a person to sense when something feels out of place, even if it cannot be explained right away. This sensitivity is not weakness, it is a form of protection. It acts as an internal alert system that encourages deeper evaluation before acceptance. When this awareness is ignored, the opportunity to prevent unwanted influence is lost. Developing discernment involves learning to pay attention to the effects that environments, objects, and influences have on your thoughts and emotions. If something consistently brings confusion, heaviness, or unrest, it should not be dismissed as coincidence. These responses can be indicators that something within the environment is not aligned with peace. Recognizing these signals requires honesty and the willingness to trust what is being sensed internally, rather than dismissing it for the sake of comfort. Discernment also requires consistency. It is not a one-time realization, but an ongoing process of awareness that must be maintained. As life changes and new influences enter, the need to evaluate and understand them continues. This ongoing attention creates a stronger sense of control over what is allowed to remain and what is removed, ensuring that the environment remains aligned with clarity and peace. As discernment grows, so does confidence in making decisions that protect your space. There is less hesitation and more clarity about what belongs and what does not. This clarity strengthens boundaries, making it more difficult for subtle influences to gain access or remain unnoticed. It transforms the home from a place of passive acceptance into a place of intentional protection. The presence of discernment changes how a person interacts with their surroundings. It shifts the focus from reacting to problems after they appear to preventing them before they take root. This proactive awareness creates an environment where peace is guarded and where influence is carefully considered rather than automatically accepted. Through this process, a deeper understanding begins to form about how influence operates and how easily it can be allowed or prevented depending on the level of awareness maintained. This understanding prepares the foundation for recognizing the true purpose of a home as a place that reflects light rather than confusion, a place where what is allowed within its walls is chosen with intention and guarded with clarity and awareness that continues to grow stronger with every decision made. A home was never meant to be a place where darkness hides quietly in the background, influencing the atmosphere without being noticed. It was designed to be a space of peace, clarity, and protection, where those who dwell within it feel safe, not only physically, but spiritually. When this purpose is understood, it becomes clear that the environment within a home is not neutral territory, but a reflection of what has been allowed to remain there over time. Light does not simply exist without intention. It must be welcomed, maintained, and protected. In the same way, darkness does not always force its way in, but often settles where there is no resistance. This is why the condition of a home is shaped by the awareness and decisions of those who live within it. Every object, influence, and atmosphere contributes to what the home becomes, either reinforcing peace or quietly allowing unrest to take root. When a home begins to reflect light, there is a noticeable difference in how it feels and how it influences those inside it. There is a sense of calm, clarity, and stability that cannot be easily explained but is deeply experienced. Thoughts become clearer, emotions feel more balanced, and the overall atmosphere supports a sense of rest rather than tension. This is not accidental. It is the result of intentional choices about what is allowed to remain and what is removed. Darkness, on the other hand, often works in subtle ways, blending into the environment so that it is not immediately recognized. It may appear as small disturbances, unexplained heaviness, or a lingering sense of discomfort that does not seem tied to any obvious cause. Over time, these small disruptions can grow, affecting the way people think, feel, and interact with one another. What begins as a minor imbalance can develop into a deeper sense of unrest if it is not addressed. Understanding that a home is meant to be a place of light shifts the responsibility from passive living to active stewardship. It calls for awareness of what is being allowed to shape the environment and a willingness to make changes when something does not align with peace. This does not require perfection, but it does require intentionality, recognizing that every decision contributes to the overall atmosphere. Maintaining a home filled with light involves more than removing what is harmful. It also involves strengthening what is good. It is about creating an environment that supports clarity, encourages peace, and reflects a sense of purpose. This kind of environment does not happen by chance. It is built through consistent awareness and the desire to protect what matters. As this awareness deepens, a person begins to recognize that the atmosphere of a home can influence every aspect of daily life. It affects how people think, how they respond to challenges, and how they connect with one another. A home filled with light becomes a place where strength is restored, where clarity is found, and where peace is not easily shaken by external pressures. This realization brings a shift in perspective, showing that a home is not just a physical structure, but a living environment shaped by what is allowed within it. It becomes clear that maintaining this space requires ongoing attention, not out of fear, but out of understanding that influence is always present in some form. The goal is not to eliminate all challenges, but to ensure that what fills the home strengthens rather than weakens those who live there, creating a foundation where peace can remain steady even when external circumstances change, and where the presence within the space continues to reflect light in ways that guide and influence everything that takes place inside it. What you allow within your home is never without consequence, whether seen or unseen, understood or ignored. Every object, every influence, every atmosphere contributes to the spiritual condition of the space you live in. Awareness changes everything, because once you begin to recognize that not everything is neutral, you step into a position of authority rather than passivity. You are no longer simply existing within your environment. You are shaping it. The unseen battles that take place do not have to remain hidden or uncontested. When discernment becomes active, when subtle entry points are recognized, and when spiritual doors are addressed, the atmosphere begins to shift. What once felt heavy can become clear, what once caused unrest can be replaced with peace, and what once went unnoticed can be brought into the light. Your home was never meant to be a place where confusion lingers or darkness quietly settles. It is meant to reflect peace, strength, and clarity. This requires intentional decisions, consistent awareness, and the courage to remove what does not belong. When you choose to guard your space with understanding, you create an environment where light is not only present, but protected, where influence is no longer hidden, and where every part of your home aligns with the peace it was meant to carry.